The fundamental concept of GST is to avoid the cascading effect of the tax on tax. And whatever is the tax paid on the input supply, that can be utilized for payment of tax which is due on the output supply by a person who is engaged in the business of output supply. It can be equated with the CENVAT credit, which is at present can be taken under the central excise law and under the service tax law. And the duty which has been paid on the input or the service tax which has been paid on the input service, that can be availed and which can be utilized for payment of the excise duty and the service tax. This under GST, under Rules Act Section 16, the similar provision is there, and a person who is engaged in supply of output supply, he can avail the credit of inputs and input service both. And this credit he can take in his electronic ledger, and the same can be utilized for payment of the tax which is payable on the output supply. And there is a provision under Section 16A, where if a person has to send the input directly to the job worker, he can do the same and still eligible for availing the credit of tax which was paid on that, subject to the condition that the goods are to come back within 180 days. And Section 35 in GST Act lays down the procedure as to how it is to be utilized. Now it is different from the present CENVAT credit rules. The credit has to be maintained, though it is not specifically mentioned, but it is obvious that the credit has to be maintained in 3 different formats. That is, the credit in respect of IGST, CGST and SGST has to be maintained separately. Account of that has to be kept separately. And the credit of IGST can be utilized first for IGST, and if there is a balance still remaining, then that can be utilized for payment of CGST and SGST in that order. And the credit of CGST in the electronic ledger has to be first utilized towards the payment of CGST, and if some balance remains, then the same can be utilized for payment of IGST, but the credit of CGST cannot be utilized for payment of SGST. In the same way, the credit of SGST can be utilized first towards the payment of SGST, and the balance, if any, is there, that can be utilized for payment of IGST, but the balance of SGST cannot be utilized for payment of CGST. Though the procedure parallel to CENVAT credit rules are yet to become, and let us wait for the input tax credit rules, which will give us further clarifications and guidelines. Thank you.